All right, we're back. We've had a little discussion on the side about what is it called? Digital homicide? Digital homicide, they're crazy games. Okay. But now we're back to doing this stuff. So we left off with us having this little maze, right? Again, we have our camera, right? And if you notice, we're going to be doing a first-person shooter. If I remove the camera, let's just delete the camera. Now, there's a problem with this if we delete the camera, right? One thing is, if I try and start the game now, it's going to give me this black screen, right? It's going to say, meh, scene is missing a full screen camera. No camera, no play, right? So this is a bad thing. But we're going to add some standard assets. And this is how we're going to do it. This is part of our standard asset package. You go to Assets, and if you go to Import Package, Characters, okay, Characters. And again, this is for testing only, of course. We're not going to sell it on Steam to make people mad, right? One thing we don't want to do is we don't want to import all this stuff, okay? Like, for example, under Assets, we'll leave the editor alone. Under Standard Assets, we're only going to be talking about first-person characters, so we're not going to import the roller ball. We're going to leave that out, and we're not going to import the third-person character. So those two things we're going to leave out. The rest of the stuff, though, we need to add in. We need to leave all the other stuff in because they give us some, especially the cross-platform input, that allows us to control the game and all that kind of stuff. There's some special scripts that we're using there that they've created for us to use cross-platform. Okay, so that's that. And then we're going to press Import. When we do that, it's going to import everything in something called a Standard Assets folder, right? So that's where it comes to. What I want to do is I want to go into my Standard Assets folder, into the Characters folder, into the first person folder, right? Let me just open this up for you so you can see it. First person character. Underneath that there's prefabs, right? Prefabs. And I want to hit this first person controller. There's the first prefab here in prefabs. And I want to drag and drop it into my scene, like so. There it is. There's my first person controller, right? Let me just close all this up so it gives us a little bit more real estate on my screen here. And we'll see what we got. Okay, so here's in my hierarchy now, I have my first person controller, which I'm going to rename to player. So I'm going to kind of rename this player. Oh, if I can actually do this properly. Not player, player. There we go. And I want to center this properly. I'm going to just reset the value so it's in the middle of our scene. Okay. Things to note about the first person controller. It has its own camera, right? Here's a first person controller. And if I actually expand the first person controller prefab, you can see that there's a first person character camera. That's just called first person camera. Let's rename this thing to player camera. It's my player camera. One thing to note, again, is if I scroll down or scroll up, and I'm just moving the camera around. This is just the camera component. I don't want to do this, by the way. I'm going to undo. I want to move my entire camera around as opposed to just my first person controller, just the camera. I'll move my whole player around. So let's rename this thing again. Sorry. First person, so player camera. And I want to move this whole player around. Make sure you grab the player, not the camera, like I just did. Move it around so that when you look at the camera itself, the camera looks at the corridors like this. Let's zoom into the player to see what we got. I'm going to press the F key. And if you notice, if I scroll right in, oops, too much. You notice that the player itself has a bit of a capsule that comes with it. Take a look at my screen here. Capsule, right? That capsule is actually the collider, the capsule collider, right? So I want to move it kind of into the entryway to my maze, right? It's got to be somewhere here. If I play the game just like this, because I've already added my collider and I press play, I get this. Right, here's my maze, right? And now I can kind of walk through and move around here. Okay. and explore my maze. Now here's the bad thing about this. If I press jump, oh yeah, I can almost see the top of my maze like this. Woohoo! I can be on the top of my maze and I can jump across. Woo! There we go, and jump again. Woo! All right, that's very cool. Let's do it one more time. Oh! Right, I'm a Superman because I can jump like way up high. I'm like, you know, like literally I can jump up, 3 meters. That's crazy, right? But one thing is the mouse look is included, so that's one of the scripts that they've given us. Now you might say, well, Tom, should we really do it this way? You know, can we make our own? Yeah, absolutely we can. But the code involved is quite extensive. They've given us something that we can use that works nice. It's not perfect by any means, and we can definitely fix it. Like there's a little bit of that's just from me fooling around in Blender. But there's definitely things we can do to make it a little better. We can modify the code. It's good to look at it and modify what we have just to see. But basically from here, you've got the basics of your first-person controller, right? Now there is no gun, right? There's nothing that comes with it. You have to program all that yourself. Okay. Let me zoom out so we can see what we see here. So again, I see this capsule. It has a camera built in. And what I want to do, if I want to add some kind of gun, is I've got to add it into the player camera. If I add it into the player itself, it won't show. And one of the things to note is this. Video games are a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's just tricks, right? So when you look at the camera, the player, if I was going to play a single player game like the one we're going to make, right? Do I ever have to look at myself? Chances are no. We may want to though. Like if I pass by a mirror or some kind of reflective surface, I may want to see something real. Right now I'm completely invisible, right? I don't have a body. I just have a camera that's mounted on top of a capsule collider. That's all it is, right? There's no mesh renderer here, if you notice, at all, right? I could add one. I could certainly, drag and drop a mesh renderer in here. And in future iterations of this, we might have a third-person object, right? Like, for example, some kind of body with a rig and bones and all that kind of stuff that we can kind of add in here, that can walk around the maze. We can do that, right? And then if it's seen by another character, it'll have its own shape and everything else. But for now, it is what it is. Let's explore this first-person controller a little bit. One thing is it has a transform like everything else. The character controller has a height. Right now the height property is 1.8 meters, which is probably the height of an average person, 1.8 meters. There's some people that are shorter or whatever. You can certainly adjust this. Same thing with radius. Radius is how fat or big the person's collider is, right? It also has other things in here, a script that allows me to walk around, as well as I have some jump sounds. Let me take a look at my sounds here. So because it's baked into the prefab. So if I go into my standard assets and I'll look at character, first person, and I'll look at audio, I have these kind of built-in sounds. So here's a footstep, another footstep, and there's a third one, right? And then there's the jump sound and the land sound, right? So all these audio assets they've given us. Like it's nothing for us to really make. It's pretty good. It even does head bob for you. So when you move, you actually have a bit of a head bob. All that stuff is working pretty good. Okay, so that's kind of your standard assets that you get from there. Now you can also add in, we'll explore, the next time we'll explore some kind of third-person view as well. But for now, we want to add in some kind of gun, right? Something to look like a gun anyway, right? Because we don't have any gun assets right now, right? So if I look at my player, and if I zoom in, I can see that the camera, my player camera is there. And again, you got to think about the player's camera mounted at the top, right? And if I'm going to put the gun in, it's going to be right here in the guy's eye, pretty much, like really inside the camera view altogether, right? Okay, cool. Let's add the gun. So how do I do this? Well, I want to right-click on my player camera, and I'm going to add a 3D object, and let's add in a cylinder. Let's add a cylinder. Whoa, that's massive. Here's my cylinder. So that's really, really big. So this is the right thing to do, right? And we're just going to rename this thing gun, right? Now we're going to make a bazooka gun. This thing is like so massive, right? But so what do? I need to scale it down a little bit, obviously. So let's like move the scale down let's say 0.25 on this side, and let's make the Z, 0.25 as well. So there's my gun, right? And also what I want to do is I want to angle it or change the rotation on the y-axis. On the y-axis, let's move it so that it is like 90 degrees. Okay, that didn't quite work at all. That was the wrong place to rotate it. Undo. What I meant is to rotate it. I just rotated around the y-axis. I meant we're going to rotate it across the x-axis. There we go. So if I rotate it, I need to rotate like this. And let's go minus 90. Oh. All right, let's go 90. There we go, 90. So there's my gun, right? And if you notice, I can move it up and down, right? And if I was to look at it from the game view, right, I don't see it right now, right, because it's not on my view. And a good thing to do when you do this kind of stuff is to put the game kind of in its own, almost like a split screen look like this. That helps a lot, because that kind of gives us a view of what the game looks like and a view of what the scene looks like kind of side by side. So I'm going to kind of go into the scene, move in here. And if you notice the gun, we can't see the gun right now for a couple of reasons. One of them is, there it is, it's being culled. Take a look, there it is in the scene, right? But it's being culled because our camera, right, is culling anything. Our clipping plane is 0.3. We have to make that a little bit different. We can adjust that later on. But for now, what I want is I want to move this object so that it's to the side, right? Oops, let me undo that. I meant I want to move the gun, right, to the side and down. So now my gun is right here on the corner of my screen. Okay, and let's just take away the split for a second. So I'm going to go back to this. And what do you think? So that's where the gun sits. So it's probably kind of on the right-hand side. It's a little bit too long. It's like a bazooka, like I said. So we're going to have to move this aside. So we're going to kind of do the same thing. So here's my gun. We're going to move it aside a little bit and maybe a little bit down. And then we look at our scene. It looks like this, maybe even more to the side. And that's where our gun is right now. Take a look. Maybe more. There we go. That's pretty good. So that's where our gun sits, kind of at the bottom of our screen, right? Now what I want to do is I want to give it a material because my default material sucks. So I'm going to go to Materials. I'm going to right-click here and create a material type. And not a physics material, just a regular material. Here it is. And the material, I'm going to call it like gray. It's going to be the gray material for the gun, right? I'm going to make it a standard material with, instead of a specular setup, because it has metallic, kind of a metallic taste to it, and I can make it more of a metallic looking object. So I'm going to kind of make it duller, right? Like maybe like almost like this gunmetal gray kind of thing. And then increase the metallic, up a little bit to make it a little bit shinier. But a lot more smooth. Less smooth. There we go. So I've changed some options here. And we've got this nice material. And what I want to do with this gray material is on the gun, I want to drag this gray material onto it. There we go. Now our gun looks kind of more gunmetal gray. All right. All right, let's run this thing and see what we've got so far. We got this. Right? There's a problem. What's the problem? Well, what the hell? It's pretty long gun, first of all. Like a long gun. It's like a rifle, right? Or a bazooka or something. And it's passing through the walls, kind of nice, right? Like if I go bam, 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 it's like I'm literally like passing through the wall. Now the good thing is, as I'm walking, right, it kind of goes with me. So it's like part of my dude, right? But when it comes to the wall, it's like literally getting lost in the wall. That's not good. So I got to fix that. That's the one thing I got to do. Now, the good thing is it's receiving shadows, so it looks like an object and all this stuff. But the bad thing is, right, if I look down, I can see the shadow from the gun too, right? And I may not want to do that. I may not want to see the gun. If I kind of, look down and stuff, I can actually look right into the, it'll hit the ground pretty much, right? Which is kind of not what I want. Let's take a look at the scene for a second and see where the gun sits and how long it is. It's kind of a long gun, eh? That's how big it is. And it's pretty low to the ground, right? If I look at my player again, here's my player, right? I mean, there's really nothing I can do about it, but the thing is, one of the things I notice is it's kind of a little long. Like that's like a massive gun. That's like a rotary gun or something. So let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's make the muzzle a little bit smaller and I'm going to pull it back just a touch more so that it's kind of, you know, into the player. Let's see what it looks like now. That's a little better, right? Still a little thick, like it's massive. It's a massive gun. If I want to make it even smaller, like right now the barrel of the gun is 0.25. Let's make it like so it's, I don't know, 0.2, whatever direction. There we go, a little bit better, a little bit sleeker. And again, it's at the corner, so if I press play, it's not as long, right? Still hits the ground, which is not cool, right? Shouldn't be able to hit the ground with my gun. And I probably want to make it go to the side more. Like, notice like it's in the middle of my character. I want to make it go to my side and a little bit, just a touch up, right? So let's just do that. Again, we're just adjusting the gun. So again, I'm going to make it go to the right a little bit and a touch up. See where it is on the game. And press play. Maybe even more to the right. Again, I'm just going to use, I normally would use split screen, but my screen is so small right now. It is what it is, right? I still think it's too long. Like I think it's, you know, the gun is way too long for the player. If I walk forward, like literally I walk into the wall, right? Which is not cool. Like it almost takes up the size of the corridor, right? And again, to note how big it is, right, from that perspective, right, I probably want to make it even a little bit shorter than what it is. One thing I don't want is a collider. I don't want a collider on my gun whatsoever, right? Because there shouldn't be a collider on my gun, right? So if I click gun, then I should probably get rid of my capsule collider because it comes with the actual the object that we're making. We made a cylinder, and we want the mesh renderer to be on. But we don't want the capsule collider to be there. Let's make it a little even smaller than this. So we'll keep on holding it up. So I'll make it smaller, shorter. And you know what? We'll change so maybe make this 0.5 altogether, and then make this even thinner. So maybe 0.15, 0.15. There we go. And let's see what that looks like on the game view in full screen mode. And now you see the edge of the gun, so it needs to come back just a touch. All right, see how it looks now? There we go. That's pretty good. Now I've got a problem. Like I said, this thing should not happen. I shouldn't be able to collide with my gun. And I have two problems actually. If I kind of run with it and I go kind of one into a wall and jump up there, and if I look around, you know, depending on the angle, I might get this weird effect where I see the gun. Look at my shadow down there. There's the shadow of the gun just kind of hanging out there, right? Because I don't have a body, so I don't cast a shadow right now, right? So all you see is like the shadow of a gun, like moving around. That's one thing. So I want to take the shadow away. And the way to do that is, if you look at the gun itself, the gun casts shadows, and we can turn that cast shadows element off. We receive shadows, but I don't care about casting shadows. So let's try that again. So now there's no shadows. Okay. Again, we don't have a body, and it makes it a little bit easier to deal with right now, right? Later on, we may add it later. I don't like this, right? So how do we get rid of that? Well, the way to do that is, this is what I'm going to explain it first before I do it, and I haven't had a chance to do that in the first class, is you actually add another camera. So what we can do is we can have multiple cameras on the scene. I'm just going to stop. Right now, our first camera is part of the player controller, right? So here's my player controller. And by the way, I'm going to apply my changes to my prefabs. So my player has my gun, right? And if you notice, right, part of the changes that I want to make is I have a player camera. And the player camera right now, as a preview, it has a gun that's built into it. But what I can do with different cameras is I can actually have one camera only render certain elements on the screen, and another camera layered on top of the first camera, this is a really neat thing, to render other things in the scene. So I can have multiple cameras as long as they're part of the same scene. I can get a composite image of both the cameras, what they're looking at. So let's suppose that I have my camera, my first camera is rendering the environment. And my second camera, right, which is in the same location, is rendering my gun, right? It looks like the gun is there, right, as part of the character, but actually it's not. It's just part of our view. It's an object. Actually, the gun is just a prop. That's all it is. It doesn't need to collide. Like, I never really actually have to smack anybody with it or anything. And even if I did smack anybody with it, it wouldn't really be the gun that I'm smacking. It would be some invisible object that looks like that's part of the part of the object to kind of coincide with my animation.
So,
yeah.
So it'd be like you creating, let's say, a box collider plot based on button press.
Correct. And you can make that collider do whatever you want. You can make it so that it hurts the other object or whatever, hits the other object, makes sound. But what I want to do right now is this gun, it needs to be inside another camera. I didn't have a chance to get to this in the morning because we kind of putted around with different objects. But let's do this. So I'm going to right click on my player camera and I'm going to create a new camera. Okay? Here's my new camera. And now this camera, I'm going to rename this thing the gun camera. Gun camera. There it is. And I'm going to have this is kind of, again, this is inside the player camera itself. So the player camera is mounted on the person's head, right? The gun camera is going to be a child of the player camera, all right? The gun is going to be the child of the gun camera, like this, in this order. So you've got the first layer is the player, then it's the player camera, then the gun camera, then the gun. Okay? Okay. Now that we've done that, I need to create a new layer. So if you look, it's just like how we created tags before. I need a new layer called gun. So I'm going to go to layer where it says default, and I'm going to add a new layer. And we're going to add a new layer that we're going to make our own name called gun. I'm going to go back out here onto the gun itself and select the gun layer. Okay, same thing with the camera. The gun camera, we're going to choose the gun as its layer. And what I'm going to do here is the second camera, the gun camera. Now notice how it says clear flags. This is interesting here. So on the regular camera, the clear flags is the skybox. We can choose a solid color, all kinds of other stuff, right? If I choose don't clear on the camera, what it's going to do is leave streaks behind, right? Think about the camera as re-rendering the scene. That's what it's doing. It's almost got a renderer that's built in. So every time the camera looks at a scene, right, it clears itself all the time and re-renders the whole scene over and over again. I can say don't clear, and if I don't clear, it's going to just choose streaks across the scene like this. Watch. I'm going to say don't clear. I'm going to press play. And when I move the scene around, right, it's not going to clear up the scene. In a second. Actually, right now it's layering, so you don't see that. Let me go to my other camera, my gun camera. For my gun camera, because it's a sub camera of the main camera, I'm going to change my clear flags to depth only. And this is where it gets really funky. If you look at my player camera, the depth, there's a depth property, we're going to leave it 0. And the gun camera, we're going to change the depth property to 1. Okay, let me show you what this looks like, all right, without clearing the flags, all right? So my gun camera is depth only. My player camera is don't clear, which means it's going to do these streaks. Let's see if we can get the streaks going. Yeah. See the streaks? So it doesn't clear my scene at all. It doesn't reset my scene. So it causes these streaks to happen. We don't want that to happen, right, in our scene? So we want to choose my main camera. Instead of don't clear, we can choose the skybox that we have or a solid color. Let's make the solid color of the sky, instead of it being like a dark blue, like or a skybox, let's make it like a solid night color, like a gray, like one of those. We can make it whatever color we want, but let's make it gray. Okay, cool. Now if I play the scene, it looks like this. Right, so my color is gray, as an example, and if you notice, my gun still goes inside, right here. Well, the reason why this is happening is we haven't finished doing the camera yet. So here's my player camera. Right now it says the culling mask is everything. That means that basically everything that the camera sees is included in the scene. Well, I want my player camera to ignore my gun layer. Now watch. I go to everything, and now that my gun layer is clicked on, I want to click it off. Now you see my gun disappears from my scene. Take a look. If I press play, right? Wait, how come it's still there? Because my other camera still has it on, and we want to ignore everything but the gun. Watch. So we're going to go nothing. We're going to clear the culling mask, so now our camera sees nothing. The second camera. But we're going to add in the gun only. So all you see in here is the gun. Now, layered together like this, it works like this. So we have both cameras working at the same time. One is only taking care of the gun. And if I pass into a wall, it doesn't hide the gun, right? The gun isn't part of the scene. It's just a prop that I can walk around with. That's all it's for. So that takes care of our camera issue. If I go on the wall now, you can see that the gun is kind of angled on the scene, right? All right. We need some kind of little aiming dot, right? Some place where the gun is going to aim, because remember, the gun is just a prop. So we need to aim the gun somehow, and a lot of times we have this reticle, right? That basically is that a little dot in the scene, you know, in most of these games, and we can color it whatever we want, yellow, red, whatever. But the little dot that kind of shows us where we're aiming. Now, how we're going to accomplish that is we're going to go back out. And by the way, we're going to go to the gun, my player, and we're going to apply the change to our prefab, right? So our prefab has all those materials in there. In fact, I'm going to grab this whole player itself, because I haven't done this yet, and drag it into my own personal prefabs. There we go. So I've got the ground, the maze, and the player prefab, right? And if you notice, I've got everything, but I need that reticle, right? So let's try and put that back in. And the way we do that is we need to create another layer, right, for our UI. We're going to create a canvas, right? So we're going to right-click outside of the gun and the object, and we're going to go to UI and kind of click in Canvas. Here's our canvas layer. All right. Now, if you look at it in 2D for a second, right? Our canvas is massive. It's like this big. Look at it. It's like crazy big. That's our canvas, right? That's what it does. But this is just a representation of what our screen is going to look like, right? Let's just zoom back in there for a second. All right. So let's go back out of 2D. So this is our canvas is there. We want to add into our canvas an image, right? An image, right? So we're going to right-click, and we're going to go UI, image. Okay, now what we actually see in the game is this big square. This big square is pretty darn ugly, right? And what we want to do here is we want to reduce the size of the width and the height to, like, I don't know, 3 or 5. Let's go to 5. So this is what we see now, this little dot. Okay? Now this dot is going to hang out all the time. It's just like an aiming place. It's silly, but it's going to follow our player around. It's almost like a HUD. It's part of our heads-up display. It's a little dot, right? Okay, let's change the color because it's pretty boring, right, of our image. We'll make the color yellow. So we're going to go yellow, and we're going to kind of go into yellow, a yellow color, right? And there it is. Now if I play the game, I've got my yellow dot, right, which kind of is a place that I'm aiming, right? So now when I'm running, no matter where I go, my yellow dot is there. That's where I'm going to actually fire my gun, right? See? So I go in there, and there's my yellow dot. Okay, the place where I'm firing my gun. then whoop, I can jump around, and then eventually I can fire my gun. Okay, cool. All right, so that's probably all the time we have today, but we've gotten pretty far. I'm going to save my scene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another little place online on Centennial College. I'm going to make another little repository, and we're going to make this. We're going to call this a continuous, something we're going to work on continuously. We're going to make this called for FPS demo, right? That's what we're going to call it. And we're going to do it for both Section 1 and Section 2. This one is for Section 1. No spaces. Section 1. And we're going to create this repository here. So that means I'm going to go into, now in order for me to do this properly, I'm going to go back into Unity. And I'm going to save the project. Now, in order for you to use GitHub properly, you need to get out of Unity in order for you to do this. Otherwise, there's meta tags that Unity kind of puts in that will not be captured properly, and you won't get a complete project. So I'm going to quit. There we go. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into that new project. So I'm going to go to Unity projects, and then FPS demo. Actually, it's called, what did I call it? I called it Lesson 7, Part 1, Section 1. COMP305, and then it's Lesson 7, Part 1, Part 1, Section 1. There we go. And no such file directory I get because of all my stupid spaces. Let me just rename this thing. That's just my own dumb thing I did. So I'm going to go back to my desktop, which is totally cool. I can totally do this. And we'll go into, this is where I have my Unity projects. Eventually I got to clean all this up. And I'm just going to get rid of some of these spaces because my operating system is not good with that. I could definitely deal with this in different ways, but I'm going to have issues later on. So I might as well just take care of this now. We'll just call it Section 1. All right. Let's just go back in there. So Unity project CD COMP305, and then it's Lesson 7, and then Section 1. Oh man, let me just list this thing and see what I got. No, I made a space. Oh, what's wrong with me? It's terrible. I'm losing it. I'm losing it, guys. Thanks, man. I appreciate your support. I love it. What I meant to do when I was resetting everything, which is in Unity projects, is take away the space. Yeah, because that space is deadly for me. Okay, let's go back and try that again. So I'll say CD COMP305, Lesson 7, Section 1. God, I'm so dumb. All right, I'll go git init for initialize my Git repository, git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say initial commit. And then now I need to add that remote, which is right here. And once I've done that, I'm going to say git push -u origin master, and that should send everything up to Git. You guys should have it all now. So if I go back to here and refresh, we're at a pretty good stopping point here. Of course, I put it in the wrong folder, Celiopolis instead of Centennial. It's nonstop today. It's me getting tired at 8:24 at night. That's what it is, right? But anyways, this is a great start for us. And what I want to get to eventually is the ability for us to import other objects other than just the stuff that we have in the asset store. And again, there's a pile of different things. If I was, for example, to look at things like, gun mesh for Blender, right? If I was to look at a gun mesh, there are tons of them, like weapons and models for Blender, the Blender repository for this. And as you can see, I can bring in, here is a, it looks like a P84 or some kind of different guns, an MP40 submachine gun that somebody made, and there's different other ones out there that you can probably grab. Here's a hatchet, right, for some kind of weapons. You can grab them and bring them in, right? I'm going to give you some of these assets so we can play around. So instead of us making like that little tube that we use for a gun, we can use a real gun for our mesh, right? So it looks like a kind of a real first-person shooter. All right, so that's it for me today. So tomorrow, again, 4:30 to 6:30, we have our exam. Please come ready. Again, you can use all your assets, everything you have online. The only thing you can't use is you can't watch a video during the exam. It is kind of a game jam. So again, whoever finishes first gets the prize, 5%, right, as the payment, right? What we do also have is the one thing you can't do is you can't collaborate with anybody in the exam. So you can't look at your buddy and go, hey, buddy, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me out? It is an exam, right? So it is kind of something that's individual. So please be ready and be on time so we can get this done. We only have an hour and a half, and it's going to probably take most of that time for you to do it. There will be no multiple choice true false. It's purely practical. Okay? So we'll see you tomorrow, and that's it for me.